our channel, The School for Solidarity. It has been a while. I haven't spoken to anyone because I have been looking after myself, taking care of myself, as they say, self-care. But I took a break and I'm back with something amazing because this formidable work that I'm going to introduce you to by my friend and colleague, very respected colleague, Nadeem Haque. We are starting from where we left off with Nadeem, but before, in the event of 1 year, it was exactly 1 year ago when I interviewed Nadeem. We had this dialogue. And in the event, Nadeem has written two more books. I don't know, maybe more. He will tell me about this. But it's the one I have just finished is I have only managed to finish one, The Quantum Traverse. The other one, Nadeem will maybe he will talk about it. He will let us know, but maybe we'll have another chat about this. So this book that I'm going to talk about with Nadeem, The Quantum Traverse, Unlocking the Mysteries of Evolution, Consciousness, Extraterrestrial Life, and Physics Through the Quran by Nadeem, is a book that explores four major scientific and philosophical questions. Heavy ones. Behold, the one is the origin and evolution of life, the nature of consciousness, the possibility of extraterrestrial life, and the unification of physics. I mean, come on, wow. So, drawing on nearly 4 decades of research, Nadeem integrates evidence from nature and the Quran to propose solutions to these very complex issues and much talked about issues. So his book has emphasized the interconnectedness of these topics, arguing that discussing them together enhances understanding of their overlaps. So Huck challenges conventional divides between science and religion, as well as the spiritual and material, the age-old issue of materialism and spirituality. So he asserts their inseparability in the pursuit of truth. He critiques false premises, biases, and institutional barriers that create intellectual impasse, offering a perspective that seeks to bridge these gaps through a unified framework. And I know Nadeem will tell us, but just quickly, when we talk about this unified framework and Quranic science integration, it refers to the concept that the Quran, revealed over 1400 years ago, contains descriptions of natural phenomena, cosmic events, and biological processes that align with modern scientific discoveries. This is what the book is all about, but there's much more. So welcome Nadeem. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for
Walaikum
taking
salam.
time again to appear here and tell us about your fabulous work. So tell me, how are we keeping with all this?
Well, this book is, taken a long time. I've been researching this for ever since I was very young, since I've been around 40 years or so.
Hmm.
And essentially what's happened is that um, in the Western world, which actually learned a lot about science and the inductive method from Ibn al-Haytham, for example, who got that concept. He was inspired by the Quran, and he learned about that methodology through the Quran. So what's happened now is that there are some impasses, and we cannot move ahead forward in several areas. So around 1,400 years ago, we had a similar problem where society was getting more into superstition and a lot of the negative aspect of mysticism. And so what happened is that you needed a revelation to get humanity back on track. So that was the Quran, and it made people, reason and think and look at the evidence, and so science and society, flourished. Although they didn't follow it 100%. If they had it, we would have been in a different situation right now. But nonetheless, it was much better than, the rest of the world, and it helped mankind rise out of the dark ages. And then what happened is that the Muslims, because they didn't follow the Quran completely, they started to decline, but from a high position. And then the Western world after the Crusades, they then went into colonialism, and they ended up conquering a lot of these the Muslim world, and the collapse of the Muslim or so-called Muslim world led to but they got a lot of the science, they got the scientific methodology from the Muslims, right? So, for example, through Ibn Rushd, Ibn al-Haytham, and a host of others, Ibn Sina, all of them. And then they developed on their own. But the way they developed was like they have developed is that the Quran tells you to use nature, but it also tells you the nature of use. When you have something, how do you use it? So you have to use it in the proper way. That's what I wrote the book out, Equilibrium, about the Mizan.
Mhm.
That's a very key point. The other point is that there is a creator, so everything is a trust from the creator. So the creator is paramount. So then what started to happen is that, like in the 19th century, people were actually moving towards a kind of a like deistic or kind of some concept of a creator, but it got subverted actually. Subverted actually, and uh, and then this then there's a lot of counter reaction against the Catholic Church and so-called religion, you know, because of the way they had been doing things. And it ended up what ended up happening is that they were then trying to solve some of these issues. How do you unify, the physics, for example, and Newton had explained the mechanics of things, how things work in terms of mathematical equations, and then Einstein came along and all that, but it didn't, it's not really, there are major issues in that area. Then there are major issues in so-called evolution, because, the fossil record does not show, transitions, and it's been about 150 years. And then there's the issue of consciousness, like, is it duality? Is it materialism? This and that. Myself and my a colleague, Mohammed Muslim, as you interviewed him, Nana Pong, and there were others who really started to look into all these things, and with our group here at the U of T, called Analysts. But then we went much beyond, the way the group was looking at things, especially Mohammed Muslim and myself. And we came, basically we wrote some books, and we kind of decided we came up with a solution. Actually, what we're claiming is that this book solves all those problems in a step-by-step logical manner. It
Mhm.
actually solves them. But if you want to get more into that, then I can tell. I'll get more into that if you ask
I
me. Yeah,
have, if
we're
we
not late.
speak, if we, look around, still in the Muslim world, we're still very, very, divinity is quite like very holy. Like we are, it's either we are too religious, right? And we outrightly reject all the scientific evidence. So I know that this is a formidable work. You and your group have done amazing job. I actually felt proud that somebody from the Muslim world is kind of thinking like this, working on these problems and issues and providing a framework. But is this for us, the Muslims, for the world? How do we introduce? How do we make way into
Yeah,
that?
yeah,
We are
yeah.
late, we are not at the table, say, for example.
No, I mean, for example, I've attended the European Society for the Study of Science and Theology, conferences, three of them.
Hmm.
And I've been the only Muslim. So they have about 100 presenters, and each time that I've gone, they've actually published my work in their journal. And because they know that there's something here, you see,
Hmm?
they know that they have issues that they cannot resolve. So
Mm-hmm.
why are they publishing my stuff? It's because I actually have the solution. So for example, there was one of the themes was, for example, on one of the occasions, is God transcendent, immanent, or transcendent?
Mm-hmm.
So then I proved that he's neither immanent nor transcendent, and he's both immanent and transcendent. So you cannot apply that. But I use logic to do that, and then I integrated the physics. Like it was just a brief introduction about the physics. So there is a lot of like there's a lot of interest. Like so, for example, they are looking at what we some of us have started to say actually. So for example, even the Ramsey Center for Science and Religion, they've asked for this book. Then also the Arizona State University, the center where they do fundamental research, because I know some of these people. They are interested to look into this. Like, I'll give you a typical example, right, about extraterrestrial life. The Quran actually it shows that this universe is teeming with life, scattered throughout the universe. Okay, and then Paul Davies, he contacted me many years ago. He's a Templeton Prize winner. Been a close friend for the last 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that he said to the BBC because they wanted to interview him about what religions and extraterrestrial life. He said, if you want to know about that, like I'm talking about 20 years or 15 years ago, he said contact Nadeem. And so they contacted me, but then they never put anything that I said on the show, and then they apologized, said we wanted to focus on Buddhism, which is not we wanted to focus on Christianity, but they talked about Buddhism and all that, right? So so what I'm saying is that of course Paul Davies he did say in Islam there are no problems with having extra life on other planets.
Mm-hmm.
But with Christianity you have a problem, right? Because Jesus supposedly came to save the sin, and then if there are trillions of planets, how does Jesus save the sins of all of them? So he kind of saved the day a bit. But what I'm saying is that uh, you know this knowledge essentially, as you know, the Quran is for mankind, right? It's for mankind, and it's telling you how to investigate things. And so we're the ones who gave the West the so-called scientific methodology. Whether they admit it or not, that's another thing. In fact, they do admit it, by the way. So I'll give you a simple example. I had a physicist friend, Amar Dara. He was doing a PhD at University of Toronto, and I came across information that all these three laws of Newton were known by the Muslim physicists before, because there's a researcher, Galal Shoki, who had done research on this. Okay, so Amar Dara himself, who was a Muslim, he didn't believe me. He said, "Come on, are you serious?" I said, "Yeah." So he read it. He read the originally in Arabic, because there's what they said in Arabic and translated. Then he went to his professor. He said, "I'm going to present this." You know what his professor said? This is at the University of Toronto. He said, "We know about all this, but we are not supposed to talk about it at the university. The Muslim contribution, at least not to that extent."
Yeah,
So what
exactly.
I'm saying
That's
is that
my
now things
point.
are opening up,
Mm.
and I'm not making a separation between Eastern and Western, but indeed things have happened in the West which are now like dominant, and they're kind of controlling the whole world in terms of what you're supposed to think and do and this and that. So, so, so this is really for the whole of mankind, and it's challengeable. And I guarantee you, they cannot challenge the proofs of God we have. I can guarantee, like for sure, like it's an open challenge. And then so once we prove that God exists and space has the consciousness,
Mm.
then the next step is, how do you get consciousness in human beings? So we went through that. And if that is also refutable, then it means you've solved the hard problem of consciousness. Now, so I'm just giving you examples of how this was done. And same with physics, there are many major issues, and but there's a very simple solution too, which we've given. You know, the question is, why are they not coming to that solution? That's another
That's
issue.
my question to you
So
as well. Because if when we say
yeah,
they or us, then I ask you, what about the Muslim world? I mean, do you think that do you have Is there like a consortium? Because I know doing all this research as well as, you have to make a living for yourself as well. So do
Yeah.
they have
Yeah.
those, like if we take the example of the West, they immediately have these fundings available. They have these, they form consortiums, they come together, they work together. And I think this
Yeah.
is the issue I, being a researcher myself, I've faced, and I know this is an issue in Muslim
Mm.
world. What is
Yeah.
your view on that? Do we have a backup?
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, but first of all, I'll go my colleague, Nana Pong, who
Mhm.
wrote a book on authority, right? So really, when we started to look into this, like when he came recently, and he's still with me right now, he hasn't gone back. We of course realized that a lot of this has to do with authority, right? So, for example, when you have the geocentric view that everything goes around the Earth, nobody questioned the very basic thing. If they questioned the basic thing, the whole thing would have collapsed, But they never did because it was authority. The
Mm-hmm.
authority was saying that everything goes around the earth. Okay, so so they say the authority is Einstein, the authority is Niels Bohr,
Yeah,
or von Neumann, someone like that, and they base wrong ideas that don't make any sense on what these guys have said, and they're the authorities, right? So who are you? Who is Nadeem Haque? He doesn't
exactly.
even have a PhD, for example. I'm just giving you.
Yeah,
Okay, who is he? But you see, the truth does not have, it has nothing to do with your name or your color, or it's the information, it's the knowledge, it's the logic. But human beings are very like, basically they get brainwashed by these superficialities.
of
Or
course.
for example, I don't have a beard. I don't have a beard, so if I go and talk at a mosque, they'll say, "Who's this guy? What is
Yeah,
he talking about? He doesn't even have a beard."
yes.
So they're
Yeah.
looking at the superficialities rather than the essence of the
I
message.
hear you
And
totally. Yeah,
this is a huge problem for mankind. If we want to rise up from this ridiculous situation we have now, you know, where genocides and all these are taking place and they mean nothing. If we want to come up with a solution, actually we call it to establish a moral nation. And I've written a book on this, but it hasn't been published. Okay. And if we
hmm
want to implement some of the things, for example, you're talking about in economics or Nana Pong, and then we have to move towards like a different way of thinking, which is, as you say, integral, right? Has integrality, but it's like it doesn't separate any of these things,
No,
religion, non-religion, spiritual, non-spiritual.
yes.
Like, I mean, what if I told you? I think I even hinted at this that some of the information we got was from extra Quranic sources that are from angels, angelic beings. We got some information from them because Muslims believe in the existence of angels. And in the
Yeah,
Quran, there's a verse that said that Allah He reveals from like through revelation behind the veil and through messengers, risalan. And it's anybody. It's not just the prophets.
no.
Now, there's a huge misconception.
Yeah,
So angels are in interaction with us, but then there's some people who have become more communicative, I mean, sensitive. And so there's some information in this book that is from there, by the way. So so in a way, like we're combining everything, right? Like
yes.
as in like one system.
Why I chose the integral framework because
Yeah, yeah,
it's all inclusive. It actually
yeah,
says not us and them. It says west, south, east, north, and west. We should share the wisdom from all the
yes,
traditions, and it's
yeah,
available. And
yeah.
as there's so much talk about consciousness, and not talk. A lot of work is being done on consciousness. I'll come to that. I have a
Yes,
question for you.
sure, sure.
But what I'm saying is, and I hear all these neuroscientists, and they are now talking about a field. They're saying the field, the information, what I call wisdom, is out there.
Mm,
Consciousness, of course, is not in the brain, it's out there, it's in the field, which means that the field belongs to no one, right? So anyone can tap into that field, meaning we all, as you said. So integral actually is encompassing all that and saying from any tradition and every tradition, there is, as you've also written, the Buddha, is a prophet. I believe so, but do you think many Muslims believe so? No. So if we have to
Yeah.
move into, the next realm, or as I mean, people say there's the fifth dimension opening up or whatever. But if we have to move forward, then we have to open up to all these possibilities and eventualities as well, that, this is the way to be. But we haven't found the solution yet. So, thank you for, doing this work. I really appreciate that. I wanted to touch upon, as we are talking about, there's so much to talk about. The four questions, the big questions that your book has addressed is the evolution and origin of life, and also the nature
Yeah.
of consciousness. So if we kind of just, combine this together rather than, addressing all of it, because we can't
Yeah.
cover all
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
How does your framework then address that, this, when you explore life's emergence? So you
Yeah.
integrate natural observations with Quranic interpretations, right? To
Yes.
challenge
Yes.
conventional evolutionary narratives. So what is the key Quranic verse or insight? I mean, why did you have to
Okay.
come
Okay. Let how
towards
this
that?
happened. So, many years ago, like in 1993, our group, the analysts, assisted the MSA at the University of Toronto to hold a lecture on embryology with Keith
Hmm.
Moore, Marshall Johnson, and TVN Prasad. They were the top embryologists. Of course, when they looked at the Quran, they said, "Yeah, it has to be from God." I'm simplifying it. Even Keith Moore, he said that
Mm.
basically he was a Muslim. By the way, he died, a few years ago at the age of 90 something.
Hmm.
But he was basically a Muslim because he believed that was from God. And because we were organizing lectures, we know because we had discussions with him. Anyway, what happened was that when I was clearing the podium for the lecture, Marshall Johnson, who was the pioneer of test tube babies, he said very intrigued by verses on clay in the Quran, and he's trying to figure out, about more about life. And I'd come across this thing about clay, and I was thinking that evolution had occurred, but I wasn't linking things. So I started to think more about, and he said that Muslims are not doing enough to let the non-Muslim world know the amazing things in the Quran. He said that to me, you
Mm.
know. So he motivated me even more. And so what ended up happening is so what happened was I started to look at the verses in the Quran, and I realized that you see, when it says that he created man from clay, min teen, it's not the clay, but something inside the clay. Because
Yes.
when it talks of the human development, it's talking about from creation from min nutfa and shaj, which means the germ cells that are in the fluid. So it's inside. So it's not the clay, but something inside. So and then James Ferris in the late 90s and Chin Kawa, they discovered that Montmorillonite clay is the only clay from which you can produce nucleotides. It's the only thing, substance. So I said, that's very interesting because the Quran is talking about that. So then I ended up writing a book on a small book on evolution using the Quranic verses. And I realized the Quranic verses are like equations, and you have to plug in, when you have an equation, x plus y equals 6. And then if the y equals 5, so if you put 5 into that, then you like whatever it is, you get the answer, right? You have variables, but the answer to a variable is given somewhere else. So you plug it in this one, then you get the solution of whatever it is, you know. Um, so so I realized that that's the way the Quran is structured. So I was able to like step by step prove how evolution occurred. Now what I did is this is where the angelic part comes in, believe it or not. And this is going to be the first time it's been explained, to anyone, okay? Other than the writings. So what happened is that for about 20 years or something, we had this view that, okay, fine, things evolve from one species to another through clay,
Hmm.
right? Clay itself evolved because it's a rocky planet and you have water, rocky planet. Plus, it also says in the Quran, you need water. that we created every living thing from water. That
Mhm.
verse is there too, right? So, so what happened is that I had two choices. Either so man and all life starts from clay, like the origin of all life, okay? And species develop from one to another. Or the other alternative is that every species is separate, but initially created in clay and then evolves through reproduction, or sexual reproduction, or it could be parthenogenesis, whatever. Okay. So I took the route of all species evolve from one another. Now, what happened was that when Muhammad Muslim came, I met him. He was a close friend, and he was in Africa for 20 years. When he came back, and 20 years ago, we had information like communication with angels. He did, and that's another long story. Like that was 20 years ago. So I said that, well, are you still involved in that? And he said, yeah. He still has communication. So I said, listen, my books are being published. We better pose questions, and I'm sure we will get the answers. And we did get the answers. This is the answer we were told. That basically the idea, I'm correct about the clay, that initially the creation is from clay. But there's no transfer of, like, one species does not arrive from another because there's not enough time for the ladder-like process. That's actually specifically what I was told. So I was given a whole like lecture, and that lecture is in the book. Of course, I couldn't state where I got it from. I just put it in there, right? So what they're saying is that you have the T-Rex line, the human line, this line, that line. Everything is automated. So everything has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And the amazing thing is that's the way the universe seems to be created. Very interesting, right? When you have galaxies, they don't evolve from one another, but they evolve from a simple state to a middle state and an end state. So similarly, life also evolves that way. So what ended up happening is I had to change my book basically on that. It's not a God of the gaps that God suddenly comes, he intervenes, he does something. It's an automated process that began from the Big Bang. So there's a huge problem with the fossil record situation.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? Because for my own
Yeah.
clarity, because
Yeah.
so how do you then separate, mysticism when you say and spirituality, and then
Mhm.
you're talking about tapping into the angelic realm or intuitive, or I mean, Quran itself is a revelation, which is through intuition, right? We can say, I know, I'm not saying claiming revelation
Yeah.
is actually
So so
intuition, but
actually, like,
so how do we reconcile that you're against this mystical experience? Because look, what you're saying
yeah.
that you got this information from the angelic realm is most mystics say the same thing because they also get the information from that realm. So what is the
Yeah.
difference then?
No, no. I think that when when I said I had problems with Sufism, remember, and
No,
then
mysticism in this
yeah, yeah,
eh,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, initially you said
Because like what I'm saying is that there's no separation between these things, but they're at the same time they're based on rationality. So you can't have some guy saying, "Oh, just believe in what I'm saying. It doesn't make any sense because I have a big beard." And
yeah.
so what I'm saying is that uh, really there's no. You see, if you really feel the presence of Allah, so someone will say, This person is very mystical." But actually he's feeling the presence of Allah by the signs of Allah or by the communication with angels, or plus
Yes.
both, plus
Yeah.
revelation. This is not only just intuition. This is
No, no,
actually,
I get you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I get you.
but what I'm
That's what I'm asking.
I'm talking about actual.
How do we make this differentiation then?
There's no differentiation. So let me give you another example without getting into, because this book does talk about physics, so it's relevant. So what happened was that our concept of physics unification was that everything is made of one single particle. It's called the microbit that came from the Big Bang. Okay, and
Hmm.
then everything is a restructuring of that. Now I had to, so I told my Nana Pong, listen, let's also verify if this idea is correct. So we were told, like literally, we were told, like I have the sentence as well, and I've copied it now into the in the physics book, the other one, right? that this concept is correct, that there was one particle and everything was simple, and everything came from that one type of particle. The problem was that for 20 years I was stuck with gravity. I had 90% of the solution, but there was 10% I wasn't sure about, like there was an issue with it. Through the communication, it was resolved in 1 second. They gave me a word and it resolved everything. So I was able to resolve what gravity is. Like right now, they're totally off base. The physics was totally off base about what gravity is, but we know what it is, and now it's in that book. So if now you tell me something, if I have a discussion with the angels about physics, is that material or spiritual?
Both. I mean, there's no separation then.
Yeah. There's no. So that was like you see, it's very interesting. They used this word frequency. All I needed to was that word, and I was able to solve it. And not only that,
Mm.
they knew how I was thinking of gravity, because I used to when I looked at microbits, I used an analogy of, like, I used to think, when you have billions of birds or millions of birds, they're flying in terms of swarms, like moving around.
Hmm.
They use that word swarms, but it's only me, like, because I was thinking, so they could read your mind and communicate with you.
So that's the cosmosymbiosis. How do you say it? Cosmobiosis, right?
Cosmobias is what we're saying is that we had to come up with another word because we can't use evolution now. Well, I mean, evolution in the sense,
Yes.
not in that sense, Darwinian and all that, right? So we just came up with
Yes.
something. We said, okay, let's call it cosmobiosis, like it's the whole system.
Mm.
We're not saying that, as far as, we're made of heavy microbits. Like, oh, the other thing that we figured out, you see, this is impossible to know at this stage, but we got it from the other side. The question was that if the everything is made of microbits, so you have, let's say, you have the atom, okay, which is made of the protons and all that, right, and electrons. Then the protons are made of quarks. That's the
Hmm.
level they've reached. What we're saying is that it goes further down. The quarks are made of subquarks, the subquarks are made of so on and so forth. How far down does it go? And we were given an answer. This is not, so there are 7 levels. So 7 level. They said your world is 7 levels from the atom. And then the other thing we discovered was, like, these are things that you cannot know unless you're told by the entity, the creator who made the universe, who's given permission for us to get that information. That there are 13 universes. And the word they use they don't use the word when they're communicating with us for universe. They use the word worlds. So when in the Surah Fatiha it says that, praise be to God, Lord of
Mm.
the worlds,
Mm.
it's talking about the 13 universes. And of course, in the universes, you have all these creatures and they have their own worlds, the world of jinn, the world of birds, the world of human. You can break it down that way too. But really, the fundamental is, that we know that at least there are 13 universes, and these are separate from each other. And then you have entities that are higher than the angels. They're the Einstein entity. So essentially, they gave us the code. They said, all the mutaka'at were, Alif Lam Mim, Ha Ya Ain Saad, and all that. They represent the 7 groups that are higher than the angels, who are close to God, and they form the chiefs on high. The Quran talks about the chiefs on high, that they have communication with Allah. So the representatives of each of these groups, they're on like a council and they have discussions with Allah about the different planets. So what they do is, you have the Yasin group, which is,
Mhm.
by the way, part of the Buddha book. So I'll give you a simple example. It says that in Surah Yasin, it says Yasin by the Quran full of wisdom. It says the translation is usually this way: Yasin period by the Quran full of wisdom, which is totally incorrect because the word uses wal. Wal means and the. So the actual translation is Yasin and the Quran full of wisdom. But the reason they put a period is because Muslims nobody could understand how can Yasin be wise. They're just letters.
Mm.
But Yasin is not, Yasin is a group,
Mm.
like the Einsad group.
Mm.
So
Mm.
these entities have actually been in communication with us. I can't get into too many details, but we've been told a lot about the universe, about the future of what's going to happen to mankind. We know a lot, but only, we're given like limited information. Um, but essentially, like, so what I'm saying is that we did like over 90% of the work, like we've been struggling. And then somehow Allah decided, okay, these poor guys are struggling so much. Let's give them a hand, Let's, there's no point in being 90% correct on gravity. Like I needed to be 100%. There's no point in being me. Okay, I got the whole thing about clay correct, but then my interpretation of going forward was not correct. So, because if you want to have authority, then you have to be 100% correct or close to it, right? You can't be 80% correct. So I think that's the reason why, we were given this information. So this is the first time I'm ever explaining it to anybody,
Hmm.
and now it's online. And by the way, you will see these things to come out true if we remain alive, because we've been so one of the areas I was very interested in to know. Okay, we're saying that in the Quran, from the Quran, it's very clear that life is scattered throughout the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Daba, it's throughout. Okay, so my question was to the angels, how what is the closest planet where there's life? I said, is this Alpha Centauri, Proxima Centauri? Is there life on there? They said no, there isn't life. So they said something very interesting. They said that your your neighbors are only a few minutes away. So I say, what does that mean? Your neighbors are only a few minutes away. Okay, we prodded further and we got more information. So what they're saying is that 700 billion kilometers from the Earth and 900 billion kilometers from the Earth, there are two planets that's way beyond Pluto that have life on them, but that life is very different than our life.
Hmm.
They're also carbon-based, but they're very different. And we will be visiting them, and we were shown the kind of spacecraft that is needed to get there. It has rotary engines. But by 2037, someone will develop what do you call a telescope kind of thing, through which these planets will be discovered, and it'll be realized that there's life on them. So this is going to happen. You see, it'll happen. But then, if we're alive, and in this interview I mentioned this, then they will say, "How did I know about this?" Like we know.
Hmm. Hmm.
Those entities, by the way, are very different than human beings. They're kind of reptilian. They have four arms. That's the first planet. And the second one, it's like they're vapory. So they're not like, okay. So the angel said that if you want to come across a planet which is just like ours, like a twin planet, where entities are just like us, even in 1,000 years, you won't be able to reach it. So it's pretty far. So what I wanted to know was if they can actually give me the information on which star system it is. And I've been told that I will find out eventually, but right now I'm just waiting. But I've not been given that information. Now, of course, in these books, other than the Buddha book, I have not mentioned any of this. Like, where did I get this information about, there being life, in 700 billion kilometers away, right? Like, why am I saying that? People will think I'm just extrapolating or just guessing, right?
Hmm.
So, yeah,
Look,
so
I'm not challenging you because I'm no,
you can
no
tell me.
scientist. I'm not a physicist. So for me,
Yeah,
all this is like you're talking Greek, but from a mystical perspective, whatever you're saying, my soul knows and understands what you're saying. That's why when I read the first chapter and the title, Clay as Catalyst, it literally gave me goosebumps.
yeah, yeah,
Because whenever I see a seed, this seedling and life emerging from there, it just gives me goosebumps. And I feel like, what is in
yeah,
the clay? You
yeah,
can
yeah.
put whatever in there and it grows,
No,
right?
no, it is, but like I should mention something very interesting and important, right? About what I just said about life in our solar system, way beyond the Pluto. So what it is that my question was that you see they have this thing called the Goldilocks zone. Goldilocks zone means that life is minimal because we have enough energy, so you have to be a certain distance away from the sun, right? So my question was, if those planets are so far away, where do they get their energy from? So we were told it's the field of fire. So I was wondering, what is the field of fire? Then I found out that I did some research that when Voyager went beyond the heliosphere, it came across a wall of fire where the temperature is 30,000 to 50,000 degrees. So from that place to the Oort cloud, which is very cold, there's an optimum point where you have water in between the two, and that's where these planets are. Like
Wow.
I didn't know anything about the field of the wall of fire. I didn't keep up with that information. But that, so it's very interesting. We were told that, yeah, it's the field of fire that gives the energy to these.
So
So let's wait and see what happens.
interesting. You know what I'm thinking? The
Yeah.
question I would ask you is that being a philosopher as well, like uh, I know that it's a human quest. We are all on a quest for truth, the truth realization, because our souls
Yes.
know that, but we are seeking that truth here on earth.
Yes.
But
Yes.
then, what I always also say is, I've worked with the very closely with the Catholic community as well, and especially on economics and, finance. And what I realized, I came up with this term that divinity with humanity is like we have to come together because divinity, all the Muslims or the East is all about divinity.
Mm.
But for humanity, the other side, the Catholics are big on humanity, right? They do so much for humanity as well. What I'm going to ask you is that when we are speculating or we are investing our resources into finding out if there's life on other planets, what is happening on with life on this planet? What is it that we are seeking? Because I know the scientists are looking for the God particle, as they say. What will happen? Do we think they will eventually find God entity? Is it like an entity which could be found?
Mm.
Or me being a mystic or a spiritual person, I say God is here everywhere. So what
So
are we looking for?
yeah, no,
What do
you
you
see,
say to this?
what I think that it is the nature of human being to wonder, and by looking at, if even like so-called abstruse things like, is there life on other planets, like it makes you think about God. It gives you a wider perspective, right?
Hmm.
Now, as far as, okay, like in a nutshell, what this is what we found out, okay, and you will probably agree with a lot. If you remove everything from space, you're still left with existence, like, which is the space.
Hmm.
That space is conscious. That is Allah. Actually, I have a two-step proof, which is the world's shortest proof for the existence of God. I know that's not in this book, by the way. So existence is eternal, you know,
Yes.
and then existence is eternal. Then this eternal is conscious, and so therefore you have a living God who is eternal and conscious. So this is like nobody can refute this proof. The simple reason is we call it the hack proof of God. Like we just came up with a name, is because you know if you say that existence is not eternal, then if existence is created, then something had to exist to create the existence, which is doesn't make sense. If existence does not exist, then how can you create someone exist to create existence, right? And then there are seven.
That's Mullah Sadra's
Yeah,
transcendental
yeah.
theosophy, primacy of existence, right?
Existence is eternal. Yeah, and then
But can I stop
yeah.
you here? You said God, that space is conscious.
Yes, that space is
So
constant.
is God is up there?
No, 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 no. What it
Oh,
is that, so can you imagine that there's nothing in space? It's difficult to imagine because then you don't have a concept of distance, right? You
yeah.
don't have a concept of time because time is due to motion of things, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, but that realm is not nothing. It is actually Allah's consciousness. So what happens is that through his imagination, he creates entities out of the microbits, which are nothing but they're sustained actually, imaginary particles, right? Because he's the Al-Haq, the truth, and then everything else is contingent upon him sustaining things. So through his imagination, he creates the Big Bang, and everything happens, and then he sets the order in such a way that if these things develop, in terms of photons moving in certain, there's photonic reactions in the body that it develops, then and only then will it access consciousness.
Hmm.
So once the human body and the other animals are formed in a certain way, and you get this motion of photons acting in a certain direction, then what happens is you become conscious. We call it the general rate of conscious. But if you have a doornail or something, it doesn't have a GRC, general rate of consciousness. It has general rate of presence. It is
Hmm.
present, but it's not conscious. So you need
Hmm.
a certain threshold. And the reason why God made a threshold is he doesn't want everything talking. Like you wake up in the morning and your desk sort of start talking to you or something like that.
Yeah.
But even that is arbitrary, you see?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the reason why, when Allah says that when, look into when Allah turned his direction to the gas and dust, dukhan, and said to it, come willingly or unwillingly, they responded, we come willingly, because God can give consciousness to anything, because
Yes.
the consciousness comes from him.
Yes.
But in normal circumstances, he's only made, like, he's made certain rules that if this is structured in a certain way, then it'll become conscious, like a worm, like a human being. And the interesting thing is, like, when a worm is conscious, you don't say, and a human being is conscious. It's not like either he's conscious or not conscious, right? So it's, in other words, it's accessing something, out there. So in other words, the brain is like a switch gear, to access consciousness. So what happens is when you die, you're given another basically body. And even if you're traveling, like, and I know this for sure, because I won't get into it, but there's, this astral traveling, it happens, it occurs. I know 100% for sure. But when you die, what happens is you're given this other body, which is made of lighter microbits, because everything is made of microbits. Even the angels are made of microbits,
Mm.
but they're at the lower scale. Remember, they said that your world is made of go 7 levels down.
Mm-hmm.
You need it to go 7 levels down, because the first few levels are what the angels are made of. Then the Ein Sod and all that, then the angels, and then you have the jinn, and then the human beings are like very, like, concentrated, right? Through, these carbon atoms and all that, right? So essentially, this is so what happens is that you are then, taken to paradise or hell, like, immediately, actually. There's no such thing as, azab al-qabr. This is all fantasy and it's nonsense. It doesn't exist. Okay. Now to prove that, you need another show. But um, but there are situations where a person is held up and is not put into paradise or hell until other people pray for that person. And I know this to be true because we've gone through this with two people. Like, we know that this happens because we're in touch with the other side, so we know what's happening. Like, we've been given information.
Mm.
So this thing about Sadka Jariya and the children praying for their parents, in other words, intercession. If Allah allows it, then it happens. It does happen.
Mm.
And but essentially, when you die, so essentially, in reality, there's no death. You see, it's just
Yes.
that your consciousness goes, but there's a reason why Allah uses the word maut.
Mm.
Like, there's a reason why He uses it, and but in reality, there's no death. It's just a transition.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing to fear.
So, just final words from you. We can
Yeah,
have another, maybe call another dialogue session because
yeah,
this is, going in another direction.
yeah,
But
yeah.
let's bring the scientists, physicists back here.
Okay, you can.
So, just final, maybe more like an advice, or, because look, you've written this book, which I think should be introduced, especially in the Muslim world,
Yeah,
as, it should be a course on, like a module on a new discipline that
yeah.
Muslims at least should be studying this. So, looking ahead, how do you then envision this unified framework influencing fields like AI, astrobiology,
Yeah,
and quantum computing in
yeah, yeah,
22nd
yeah,
century? And what advice would you give young researchers bringing science and scripture together? What
yeah,
advice would you give to them?
yeah. I would say that, focus on that there is one God, and focus on the Quran, and then, you can read books like mine, and inshallah, we have many plans to spread this information through conferences. Inshallah, it's going to happen. Like I said, that we need to establish a moral nation, and this moral nation will arise from these ideas,
Inshallah.
and it's going to take time. I think it will take about 35 to 50 years.
It's a
We'll
process,
be
it's a
not here or
journey.
very old.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a
it's a
process, so it's going to
process.
happen. And
Yes,
it is,
yeah.
because remember, in the Quran says, "We will show them our signs in their farthest in the horizon within themselves until they know that this is the truth." Is it not sufficient
And
that
I
they're
think
looking?
the signs are very visible now more than
So
ever.
gradually, right?
Yeah.
Gradually, it's going to happen, and all these evil forces, evil powers that are, blocking man. By the way, we were told that this is not the worst planet.
No.
There are other planets much worse than this. What they said is that the problem with the Earth is that there are elites who are actually messing up the thing, but generally people are good. This is what
Very, I
so
believe so.
so
Yeah.
what we need to do is like get back all of humanity, to this vision that the Quran is talking about. Because after all, Prophet Muhammad is the prophet of everybody. He's not just the prophet of the Muslims, who are wearing turbans, or like there are many things we could talk about and that we realized through contact with these entities and also on our own, is that Surah Maryam, like this is a whole new topic, is the most important chapter in the Quran.
Hmm.
And in Surah 74, where it says on it 19, that's one reason why it is actually referring to Surah Maryam in reality. It is. And and it's a woman,
Yeah.
using the woman to show the ideal character, and anyway, that's another long topic. But so
Thank
what
you
I'm
very
saying is,
much, Nadeem.
thank you.
We'll continue this because this is very interesting. It has sparked, I was also going a bit sluggish intellectually. And
Yeah,
I thought, looking at the state of the world, I was like, I cannot be bothered
yeah,
about it anymore. Who's listening
yeah.
to our words? But I
No,
think you have reignited that in me. So thank you so
no,
much.
no, no. Keep going,
Inshallah.
keep going on, keep
Okay.
going.
Assalamu
Okay,
alaikum.
thank you. Salam alaikum.